Hello BookTube, and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. So I've been working on these 4 books here, but before I go any further, I've got a book haul to report. So I've been reading Wolf Hall, and as I mentioned in my started video for this, I got this out of the library. My school library only has Wolf Hall, the first book in the Cromwell trilogy. In the past, I've seen some of these books at bookstores here in Vietnam, but I haven't seen them recently. But as I said in my started video, I suspected that I may be able to order them by delivery. Now that I'm into Wolf Hall, I wanted to wait until I was a little ways into it, but I'm into it now. 184 pages so far. And I've decided that this is something I would like to continue with if I can. So, searched online, and sure enough, I was able to order the books. So here is book 2, Bring Up the Bodies, the book 2 of the Cromwell trilogy. You can see it's actually still wrapped. And book 3, The Mirror and the Light, still in the wrapping. I will get to these in due course. I'm going to, I think, just do this trilogy as a set. Book 1 first, and then book 2, and then book 3. So I'll film videos on these books when I get to them. So I suppose I should talk about Wolf Hall. Last week, I was at page 132. I had just started it last week. I'm now at page 184, so I'm beginning to form a bit more of an impression of it. I struggle a little bit with the prose here. It's not insurmountable. There are some pages I have to read twice, and then there are some paragraphs that I read 2 or 3 times, and then they are still a bit opaque to me, and I just move on. And I've never encountered something that's completely derailed the narrative for me. And of course, it helps that it's historical fiction, and it helps that I vaguely know this history. This Sceptered Isle, Monarchy by David Starkey, the Tudors TV show, which I actually watched from start to finish a few years ago. That helps. So, for example, the Duke of Suffolk, Brandon, as he's referred to here. I remember that character quite clearly from the Tudors TV show. It was a character played by Henry Cavill. A lot of the characters mentioned in here, I just picture them from the Tudors TV show, and I know that's cheating a little bit. I'm supposed to get my portrait of them from the novel, but I know who these characters are largely. It helps me keep track of them. If I lose the thread of the narrative, I can pick it up again. But there are passages that are a little bit tricky for me. Now, to be perfectly honest, I think this is the type of book where, had it not been so highly praised by everybody else, people who are a lot smarter than I am, my inclination would have been to blame the book. But because everybody else has praised this book so much, when I get to a passage I have trouble comprehending, I think, okay, it must be my fault. Everybody else loves the book. And, to be fair, it probably is my fault, but it made me reflect on how often I tend to blame books when I don't understand them well, or when they have prose that I struggle with. And the only reason I'm not doing that in this case is because this book has been so highly praised, but I wonder how many other times has it been my fault all along and not the book? I finished parts 1 and 2 of this now, and I'm now on to part 3. And I realized while searching for Steve Donohue's commentary on this book that he actually did this for his book club earlier this very year, which I must have missed, or maybe I saw it and I just forgot about it. He does so many videos. So I went back after I finished parts 1 and 2, and I watched Steve's video on it. And I'll link to that in the description down below. I also, on my own blog, I posted a link to Steve's video, and then I gave my commentary on Steve's video in written form, because that's what blogs are for, right? To give your 2 cents. So I'll link to that in the description down below as well. Steve's enthusiasm for this book and its prose style is really infectious. I mean, watching him gush about this book, you feel like, okay, well, there's got to be something to it. And I'm glad I'm reading it. I'm glad I have his videos to kind of help me appreciate it. There's one passage where I really struggled to tell what was going on, and he actually reads through that passage in his video, and maybe it's worth reading it again here, because it's maybe illustrative of the tone of this book. So the setup is Thomas Cromwell is working for Cardinal Wolsey, and he's heard some juicy gossip while Cardinal Wolsey has been away. And he's teasing Wolsey with the gossip. So he says, "So has your lordship heard?" "No, forgive me. It is not fit for your ears." "What?" says the cardinal. "It is only rumor. I should not like to mislead your grace." "You cannot speak and not speak. You must tell me now." "It's only what the women are saying, the silk women and the cloth merchants' wives." He waits, smiling. "Which is of no interest to you, I'm sure." Laughing, the cardinal pushes back his chair, and his shadow rises with him. Firelit, it leaps. His arm darts out. His reach is long. His hand is like the hand of God. But when God closes his hand, his subject is across the room, back to the wall. The cardinal gives ground. His shadow wavers. It wavers and comes to rest. He is still. The wall records the movement of his breath. His head inclines. In a halo of light, he seems to pause, to examine his handful of nothing. He splays his fingers, his giant firelit hand. He places it flat on his desk. It vanishes, melted into the cloth of damask. He sits down again. His head is bowed, his face half dark. He, Thomas, also Tommaso, and Thomasis Cromwell, withdraws his past selves into his present body and edges back to where he was before. His single shadow slides against the wall, a visitor not sure of his welcome. Which of these Thomases saw the blow coming? There are moments when a memory moves right through you. You shy, you duck, you run, or else the past takes your fist and actuates it, without the intervention of will. Suppose you have a knife in your fist. That's how murder happens. He says something. The cardinal says something. They break off. 2 sentences go nowhere. The cardinal resumes his chair. He hesitates before him. He sits down. The cardinal says, "I really would like the London gossip, but I wasn't planning to beat it out of you." So forgive me for reading that at length, and forgive me for reading it poorly, but I read that and I really only had a vague idea of what was going on. And in fact, the first time I read it, I misinterpreted it. I thought that the Cromwell had made a feint as if to attack the cardinal, Whereas I guess what had happened, and this is very clear when Steve explains it, is Cromwell had run back against the wall of the opposite room as in a retreat, as if he was afraid that the bishop was going to, as if he was afraid the cardinal was going to attack him. But I mean, you can tell just from that passage maybe that this is not just historical fiction in the sense of what did the king do where to who. This is literature. And there is my weakness, because I am much more, what's the word I'm looking for? I like simple prose, and I like simple stories, and I like the details of who did what where. But, you know, that's, I guess, I should have known, and in a way kind of I did, with all the praise that this book was getting. I also struggled with the Alexander the Great trilogy by Mary Renault, which was also literature. So it's Steve Donahue says in his video, it's historical fiction, but it's historical fiction unlike you've ever read before, because most historical fiction is just about dramatizing the facts, not prose that is that ambitious. But I find that ambitious prose sometimes, it's not something you can read quickly. It's interesting. The copy I got in the mail here, this is for The Mirror and Light, but it's got a quote on the back praising Wolf Hall. This is from the New York Times Book Review. It says, Wolf Hall has epic scale, but lyric texture. Its 500 plus pages turn quickly, winged and falcon-like. And I'm like, do the pages turn that quickly? I mean, it's interesting. I'll grant you that. It's interesting because I know I was just complaining about how it's difficult to digest, but for the most part, it's accessible. That passage I read was one of the more inaccessible passages. For the most part, it is comprehensible. And if you've seen the Tudors TV show, or if you know anything, you know that there's an inherent political drama in here, and there's an inherent soap opera in here, the wives of Henry VIII. So that keeps it interesting. And, I've had a good reading week for this. Over 100 pages, that's good for me. But it's not, what was the quote? It's not pages turning quickly, winged and falcon-like. It's pages I have to linger over, pause, reread. Interesting, but it's not, sorry, what was the quote again? It's not pages turning quickly, winged and falcon-like, by any means. Not for me, at least. And I suspect it's not meant to be. I suspect this is kind of prose that the author is writing without the intention of you going through it quickly. But I don't know. I know this book has been very popular on BookTube, so let me know what you guys made out of it. But yeah, in part 3 now, page 184, we'll continue on. And then Journey to the West. Last time I left off on page 1874. I'm now to page 1924. And I've concluded another story arc here. And the story arc it goes through chapters 80, 81, 82, and 83. So I guess 4 chapters here. I talked a little bit about this last week, but for the purposes of retelling the story arc, let me go back to the chapter 80. So the monk the pig, the monkey, and Friar Sand, the sand demon, are traveling through the forest when they meet a demon disguised as a young girl who has a sob story about how she's been terrorized by bandits and she's tied up to a tree. Monkey immediately recognizes this as a demon in disguise, but the monk is credulous and has a very merciful heart, so he frees her and he brings her along with him. They come to a Buddhist monastery where they stay the night. But as they're staying at the Buddhist monastery, strange things start to happen. Some of the monks disappear, and then only skeletons are left. So there's a demon that's been eating the monks. Monkey disguises himself as a novice monk to try and lure the demon out. And sure enough, it's a woman, demon disguised as a woman, who tries to lure the novice monk, who's really Monkey, but the demon doesn't know that, tries to lure Monkey out to the garden for sex, which is presumably how those other 2 or 3, I forget if it was 2 or 3, but how those other monks meant their doom, even though they were monks and they were supposed to be chaste, but they gave in to temptation, were lured out, and then devoured. Once Monkey figures out what's going on, he attacks the demon fights back, they have a big battle, and then the demon takes the monk, who the one Monkey is escorting to the land of the West, takes him away with the intent to marry him. Now this is, I don't think, as far as memory goes, I don't think this is clearly explained in the text, at least maybe not in this translation. I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering something. But something I picked up from the Great Courses series lecture on this book, from their History of World Literature course, is that the monk, through his cycles of reincarnation, and because he has never had sexual release through these cycles of reincarnation, his flesh has become very pure. If you eat his flesh, you can achieve immortality, which is why all the demons want to eat his flesh. But also, if you can get his semen, you would achieve immortality, which is why the she-demons want to mate with the monk. So she is trying to marry him. She's got this whole wedding feast planned. She's like a lot of these other she-demons, she's described as being extremely beautiful throughout. Now, I think this is a form she just assumes, and later on we find out she's a white rat demon. But all of these demons are some kind of animal spirits who are just able to assume forms. But the monk is not at all interested in her, and it's the way it's described as with the monk's other encounters with females. It's not that he's encountering temptation and then he has to resist it. He just is not interested in sex at all. Has been his character throughout the book. So he's completely repulsed by this, and the monkey has to save him. The monkey, well, to cut a long story short, because there's a few, as with all these stories, there's a few different battles, there's a few schemes that don't work out. Whoever wrote this book was in no hurry to get to the end of it. Every episode has a few twists and turns in it. But eventually, Monkey discovers that the she-demon is burning incense to the heavenly king Li and her brother Nedza, the heavenly king's son. So he realizes that this she-demon must be connected to heaven, so he goes up and creates a ruckus up in heaven. Now, one thing that I had heard before I started reading this book, and one thing that was also in the publisher's introduction to this book, is that we frequently in this book see the heavenly court, where the Jade Emperor of Heaven is ruling over all the gods of heaven, and it's believe I I believe it's supposed to be a satire on the imperial court in China and the various bureaucracies there. And one thing they said in the publisher's introduction was Monkey frequently gets frustrated that certain people, he's able to determine that certain demons are connected to various people in the heavenly court, but he can never get them punished because they're too high up or they're too connected. And again, this is, I believe, supposedly supposed to be a satire on the Chinese court at the time, the Chinese Mandarin court. But this edition has no footnotes. So if there's any specific references, I'm missing them. I believe that other editions, I think there's an edition by Arthur somebody or something, which does have actually detailed footnotes about all the cultural allusions, but this one does not. Anyways, there's the Heavenly King Li. The other thing, I imagine when I'm reading this that all these heavenly kings and deities are people who would be already familiar to a Chinese audience with other mythologies. I've looked them up a little bit on Wikipedia, and they're all on Wikipedia, although it's a little bit difficult to tell sometimes what their mythology is on these Wikipedia pages. But again, maybe this would be a case where a version with more detailed notes would be nice. I'm not sure how consistent their portrayal in this book is with their other portrayals in Chinese religion or in Chinese mythology. But there's the Heavenly King Li, and there's also the Jade Emperor, who's the Emperor of Heaven. So I'm not sure what the difference in jurisdiction is between the Heavenly King and the Emperor of Heaven. Heavenly King Li has got a warrior son, Netza, who's got famous for killing a bunch of demons. And he's also got a son, Maksa, who's an apprentice. No, apprentice is not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking on the word. Novice, who's a novice to the Bodhisattva Guanyin, the female Buddha. And there's one more son in the family as well. I forget his name. They all appeared in the early chapters when Monkey was fighting his war against heaven. And in fact, it was Netza, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Nezha, who was able to eventually subdue Monkey when nobody else could. Anyways, there's this long drawn out scene where Monkey makes his complaint to the Jade Emperor of Heaven. Jade Emperor of Heaven sends Monkey to make the complaint to the Heavenly King Li. Li accuses him of making a false complaint and tries to get Monkey on charges of making a false accusation. When eventually it does turn out that the complaint is true, the demon, the she-demon, had been defeated by the Heavenly King Li and Netza before. And as a result of being defeated, they spared her life and she became like an adopted daughter into the family. So because of that, she is kind of technically their relation, even though they really haven't had anything to do with her for the past 500 years or whatever it is. It was a long time ago. And she, meanwhile, has resorted back to her evil ways. So they come back and they defeat her and they spare her life, but then she's got to promise to be good again. And it's I've mentioned that this book can be very repetitive. This is another kind of repetitive element where some sort of God in heaven comes down, recognizes who the demon was, and the demon's like an escaped pet or a former servant or something like that. And then the God just chastises their former servant or their former pet and brings them back. And that's how the demon is defeated. And yeah, that's as far as I got. And then chapter 84, which I'm going to be starting this week, is starting a new story. So on to that next. I have made very little progress on how to teach for exams, just 4 pages. I don't know what I'm going to do with this book. I've only got 50 pages left, so I should just try and sit it out sometime and just finish it out. But I'm distracted by the other books I'm reading at this point, and my enthusiasm for this one has gone down. It's, the 4 pages I read for today have been like the rest of the book. It's all very solid advice. It's mostly stuff I already knew, or common sense or something like that. But then that's because I've been teaching for exams for I don't know how many years now. I imagine for new teachers this book would be a lot more useful. So I don't really have any criticism of it. It's all very solid advice. It's just I feel like it's kind of stuff I already know. And then the heavy one, Marvel Horror Lives Again. So last week I had read up to page 1004. This week I only got about 46 pages read. I'm up to 1050. Continuing Ulysses Bloodstone, who's got a rather convoluted backstory, but it's got the short version is he fights monsters, and there's some sort of special gemstones they're looking for. It's all right. Fighting monsters is somewhat of a simple concept. There's a more convoluted backstory, which is interesting, but not fully brought to its potential. Some of these action panels, it's a little bit difficult to tell what's going on. I'm not sure if this is going to be clear on the camera, but these panels here, it was just hard to tell exactly who was hitting who where on some of them. And I think some of this may be because I think these black and white ones were published as oversized comics in the 70s. Is that right? And maybe by being kind of condensed down into these normal size pages, that's why the artwork is getting a little bit blurry, or blurry is not the right word, but I don't know, a little bit difficult maybe, or I don't know, maybe it was just always like that. So yeah, the Ulysses Bloodstone, it looks like it's going to continue for another 100 pages. And then there's one more monster story by the end of it. So I am getting close to the end of this book, but actually I shouldn't complain. This is all pure junk food, and I'm mostly enjoying it. And that's my reading week for this week. So I will stop it here, and I will see you next week, BookTube.